Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Saving Bread podcast. I'm Allison White, and Saving Bread is a place for thoughtful conversations about baking, from bread and pastry to grain, fermentation, and the people keeping the craft alive. Today is going to be a short episode, just a quick introduction of who I am, why I decided to start this podcast, and what you can expect moving forward. So, first of all, if you're here listening from the very beginning, thank you. I genuinely mean that. I really have no idea what to expect starting this podcast, but I've had this idea for years, and I just decided it was time. Enough thinking about it. Let's just go. And so I bought a podcasting mic, and I'm sitting in my daughter's closet, and I have all of these ideas, and I'm excited, and truly, thank you. It's going to be a really fun ride. So, this podcast is not intended to be storytelling. I want this space to be educational. But in order to move forward, I think it is a good idea to share a little bit about myself, why I started baking, and then we can all be on the same page of where this is going. So, I live in Northern California, and I own a very small cottage bakery called Matriarch Bread, which I started in 2021 when I was about 8 months pregnant with my second daughter. I don't know that at 8 months pregnant is the best time to start a business, but thankfully it did all work out for me. However, my background is not in baking at all. My background is in fitness and nutrition. I went to school because I wanted to become a dietitian, and that did not work out for me. And so when I started working in hospitals and realized that wasn't going to be a good fit for me, I pivoted and I was in the fitness industry for about 12 years. And I did it all, everything from Zumba to kickboxing, indoor cycling, personal training, you name it, I've tried it. At my core, I am a coach and a communicator, and that is why I strongly felt the podcast was the perfect medium for sharing ideas and information. But anyway, back to my origin story. I was working at a cycle studio, and then COVID happened. And like so many other people, someone gave me a sourdough starter during COVID, and I became just a proper COVID sourdough baker. And my friend Sarah, shout out Sarah, gave me some of her sourdough starter, and that thing was dead. Sarah, I love you so much. Thank you for changing my life with your sourdough starter. But that sourdough starter was not alive. And I didn't even care. I made bread and I thought it was magic. And with my background in fitness and nutrition, I was interested in making bread that was very nutritious, healthy, and had a lot of whole grains. So the next sort of piece to that puzzle was me buying the book Southern Ground and driving up to Central Milling, which is about 2 hours from where I live, and buying a grain mill and a bunch of whole grains. And truly, I just dove completely headfirst down the rabbit hole, which, if you know me in person, it feels pretty on brand. And so what I would say it started as curiosity quickly became something a lot bigger. Bread opened so many doors for me and really provoked a lot of questions for me. Questions about grain, questions about nutrition, fermentation, agriculture, why some bread feels really nourishing and others doesn't. And what we've gained through modern convenience of bread baking, and maybe some of the things that we've lost too. And over the last 5 years, I've spent an incredible amount of time, energy, and honestly, dollars learning how to work with freshly milled flour, fresh stone milled grain. I've learned how to use a pH meter. I have a deep understanding of fermentation, and at this point in my bread career, I also teach regularly and teach others to do what I've done in a way that hopefully feels approachable and practical. So one thing that I've noticed just out in the world that is there is a lot of information floating around on social media, in books, on websites, forums, YouTube. And while there's some really great, incredible information available, there's also a lot of confusion, like contradicting opinions or buzzwords that maybe the average person might not understand. rules that aren't actually rules and more of suggestions. And sometimes I think people can walk away feeling overwhelmed instead of empowered. So before we jump into interviews and bake-alongs and deep dives into food and baking science, I thought it would be helpful to spend the first few episodes building a foundation together and establishing common vocabulary and a common language that we can all speak together as we move along. I want to talk about some of the more inflexible principles of bread baking, truly understanding fermentation, learning how to think about dough and when it's maybe ready to move to the next step, and hopefully make a lot of this feel much less intimidating. Because this podcast will absolutely, of course, include information about sourdough. Like, that's my area of expertise, but it won't just be about sourdough. We're going to talk about bread, pastry, grain, milling, fermentation, food science, the lot, baking equipment, cottage baking, just the art of making food with your hands. And I want this to feel like a place where professionals and home bakers and maybe a novice baker, we can all sit at the same table. I want everyone here to feel welcome. This is where curiosity matters much more than perfection. And I hope we can all learn, me included. Like, spoiler alert, like a huge reason I started this podcast is so I can ask all of the questions that I've had burning in my brain for the last 5 years to people that I really have come to care about and respect. And so the first few episodes will focus on building that common language. So we'll cover things like I mentioned, what sourdough is, starter maintenance, fermentation basics, just that common baking vocabulary. And we'll talk about some of the foundational principles that will make everything else easier to understand down the line. I don't want any confusion here. From there, we will deep dive into what most people come to me for, specifically pH, and we will talk about different types of flour, grains, baking equipment, and running a cottage bakery. And my dear friend Leah, who is a customer as well, she'll be joining me regularly for some of our more casual episodes where we answer listener questions and just chit chat about all things bread. It's going to be great. Eventually, we'll move into guest interviews with bakers, authors, oven makers, baking school owners, farmers, millers, and a growing list of wonderful people working very hard to keep the craft of baking alive and well. So, why the name Saving Bread? Okay, so I went back and forth on the name for a long time, but ultimately I landed here because I do think that bread actually does need saving. Not like grocery store bread, I mean real bread. And I don't mean it in a dramatic way, but in a thoughtful way. Bread became fast, industrial, something people fear or avoid, especially in the fitness world. Something totally disconnected from farming, craft, and nourishment. You can go to the grocery store and it's just sitting there in a plastic bag, or it's simply a vessel for the inner workings of a sandwich with little to no thought. But real bread, the kind made slowly and intentionally with quality grain and care, like that still matters so much. And there's so many people quietly doing beautiful work to preserve that. Bakers, farmers, millers, teachers, people committed to keeping traditions alive while also helping them move forward. My hope is that this podcast becomes a place for those conversations. Thoughtful, welcoming, curious, and grounded. A safe place where we can learn together. So, thank you. Thank you for being here from the beginning. I am so excited to see where this goes. And in the next episode, we will start laying that foundation. But until then, welcome to Saving Bread and long live real bread.